Hello class, I am Preston Pace and I'm doing my presentation on the country of Niger in Africa. And because I don't have very good equipment, I'm just making do with what I have. I am going to have to turn the lights off so that you can actually see my presentation, but I'm just going to stand right here so that you can still see me, but you're not going to be able to see too much besides the PowerPoint. I'm sorry about that. Okay, as I said, I'm doing my presentation on the country of Niger, which is in sub-Saharan Africa. This country is just on the edge of the Sahara Desert, and then also is the Sahel is covering, or the Sahel, however you want to say it, is covering another half of Niger, and then the last third or quarter of Niger is more tropical steppe climate, so that's where most of the people live. Okay, go ahead. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the main physical features of Niger. One of the first that I wanted to talk about is that Niger has a massif, or massif, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it is this little area right here. Massif is a small group of mountains that's isolated, and they're called the Aïr Mountains. And the peak, the highest point in the Aïr Mountains is 6,634 feet, which is also the highest point in Niger. The rest of Niger is fairly flat, and it's about 630 feet above sea level, right around the Niger River. The Niger River, as you can see, is going through the bottom corner in the south of this country, and that's the main source of water. There's not very many other sources of water in this country, so most of the population lives right here in the bottom. And here's the capital right here. So the top northern half, or 3/4 of this country, is where mostly tribal people and nomadic or pastoral nomads are. They migrate through here, and so it's more of a small population. There's not very many big towns in northern Niger. Niger is named after the Niger River, and it is, like I said, mostly desert. The Sahara Desert covers right here, and that's the most hot of climates. It's a desert climate. And then we have a dry desert climate here along the Sahel, or Sahel. The Sahel, or Sahel, however you say it, is a little strip just below the Sahara that goes across the entire continent of Africa. And it is kind of the transition point of the hot desert of the Sahara to the dry but more moist region down here below. And it gets a little bit more bearable, doesn't get as hot. So it kind of changes from hot and dry down to more moist and more tropical temperatures at the bottom. Go ahead. The climate we've already been talking about in Niger. It's a dry climate, and so that means that it's of the category B in the Köppen classification system. As I said, up here is the dry desert. Here is the dry steppe, and the tropical steppe here at the bottom. Okay. The Sahel is a climate zone that marks a transition from the hot desert of the Sahara to the subtropical climates over here. But overall, as you can see here, the 4/5 of Niger, there's only about a fifth of it that's actually more wet. The rest of it is all desert. So there's not very many people that live up there. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Tenir Desert, which is a little part of the Sahara Desert that's the most hot. And this is in Niger. Okay, so over here we see that there is sand, and then there's also places where it's just gravel and rocks through this desert. And you can go through here and not even find any wells of water for hundreds of miles. And so preferably people, when they travel through, go on camels, and they carry stuff with them so that they can survive across this hot desert. Interesting geographical feature that I wanted to talk about that's in this region is an oasis that is kind of like a stopping point, kind of like a rest stop for people who are traveling through the Sahara. Okay, go ahead. While the Sahara Desert gets only to about 108 degrees Fahrenheit, that's the hottest temperature that's been recorded there. Over here, in the Bilma Oasis, it's gotten to be about 118.8 degrees Fahrenheit. And so I definitely would not want to live there. That's too hot for me. It's in the middle of the desert, the Tenir Desert, and it's home to about 6,500 people in different villages in the area. The main village that's in the center of this little oasis is called Bilma, named after the oasis. Bilma, for hundreds of years, has been a stop in the Trans-Saharan caravan. And as you can see here, I included a picture of this people in this caravan that are going across on camels, and they would stop here to get rest and supplies and water. Go ahead. The wildlife in Niger is very unique compared to the rest of the world because of its super dry climates. And also in the southern half it has some other interesting animals that you can't find anywhere else in the world. Right here we have the python, and there's some huge pythons in Niger. I was looking on Google, and there's pictures of pythons that have eaten other large mammals, and they look like they're gonna pop, but they're huge snakes. And then we have an antelope here, which looks a little bit different. It has really big, tall horns, and it's a different color than the ones that we find in different parts in the United States that are more dry and have sagebrush and stuff. Here is a 22-foot crocodile that people of a village are bragging about. They've gotten rid of it. I think it's been a problem in their town for quite a while, and so this is its grave that they're burying it in. Here is a lion. There's a hyena, and we also have leopards and horned vipers in the north, in the desert sands. And then right here we have a manatee, which is only seen in this area. It is a mammal, and it lives in fresh water. And that is found on the southern tip, of course, of Niger, because that's the only place that water pretty much exists besides those oases and other small places. Go ahead. There are several environmental issues. One of them, as you can guess, would be droughts and famines that exist here, and they recur very often. Mostly in the north, there's so many it's so dry that it causes issues for those pastoral nomads as well as agriculture in the south. They're not able to grow their crops, and their crops fail, and so it causes food prices in the country to rise, which in turn creates food shortage and hunger issues throughout the country. In 2012, recently, there was a Sahel drought that happened, and just what I was talking about happened. It was devastating for the country because of the food shortages. One more thing I wanted to talk about that's an environmental issue is that there's lots of poaching that goes on of those wild animals that we saw on the other slide here. We have many endangered species that are in this country because of poaching and because of human civilization creeping into their habitats. Okay, go ahead. The politics in Nigeria are very unstable. They've been kind of going through several revolutions and changes. Nigeria used to be a colony of France until 1960, when they declared their independence, after a period of France kind of giving more and more responsibility and control to the leaders that were in the country, and then they finally gave them their independence. The country has practiced slavery until 2003, but reports show that it's still going on. People are still having people that are working for them, that basically it's slavery. And so that is an interesting aspect. The United Nations, I was going to say, they deem Niger as the least developed country in the entire world. Since its independence, the country has gone through several constitutions and changes to the different constitutions that they've had. Recently, a revision took place in 2011 when their leader decided that he was going to change the constitution to keep him in office. And so the people revolted against that, and they changed it back so that he could get out of office. And so they've been through several periods of civil unrest. Go ahead. The culture of the people. Now I just want to talk about the people instead of the geography. The people, their culture is based mainly on, all the traditions are based mainly on Islamic beliefs and the Islamic religion. It still is practiced, even the pre-Islamic culture is still practiced here. They're very religious. The most rural people in Niger, they eat millet. That's the staple of their diet. But they also eat corn and macaroni, beans and peas and other things. Those things are other staples. On special occasions, which I thought was interesting compared to our country, they eat rice, and they'll also roast wildlife, meat over the fires or different things. And I saw it was kind of cool. They had a big rack full of all of these animals that had been roasting in the fire, and then they celebrate. Another aspect of their culture is that, and I'm going to talk about this later in this presentation, is that people in this culture, the men are the dominant role in families and in the communities, and so their daughters are often given as wives at young ages as dowry gifts or for other reasons before they are 18. And so Niger is actually the most underage marriages in the world happen in Niger. That's where the majority of those take place. Go ahead. Okay, now in Niger, the rate of natural increase, based on a 2012 assessment, is 3.8, which is above the rate of replacement at 2.1, and so they are growing. As a result, there is more young people than old people. Currently, Niger is one of the least developed in the entire country of Africa, and only 18% of the country is urban. There are 16.9 people living in 16.9 million people, living in Niger as of 2013. And so there's not very many, and most of them live in the cities in the south. Okay. There's one more thing that I want to talk about as well that I thought was interesting about the education that these people have offered to them. 43% of males and 15% of females are literate in this country. So you can see what that means. That over 55% of the men in Niger aren't literate, and 85% of the women are not literate. And so there's not very much education that's available to these people. Okay, go ahead and continue. The social status of women in Niger is that they have less authority than the men. Men are the dominant role, as I said. And so there's not very many women that are in the working class. They're mostly taking care of their families and being mothers, which is good. Also, the percentage I found in a scientific study done in Niger, there was a survey, and 77% of the girls in Niger are married before the age of 18. So that means that if I had 5 sisters in my family, 4 of them would be married or given to someone before they are 18 years old. The custom of the people in this area, especially in the more tribal areas, it's not so much so in the urban areas, but in the tribal areas, the girls are given as a dowry gift. I read a story of a family that was struggling financially, and so in order to get money, they got a loan from their friend that lived next to them, and then they couldn't repay the loan, and so instead they gave their daughter, who was 13 at the time, as a dowry gift to that neighbor, and she became his second wife. Okay, so from a typical man's point of view, women are less dominant and less important. They just bear children, and they don't necessarily have very much authority in the home. Okay, go ahead. Okay, I talked a little bit about women's and men's roles in the country. In 1993, this is a positive thing. In 1993, there were 5 women that were elected to be in the parliament of this country. And as of 2012, 13% of the seats in parliament are held by women. In Niger, women are discouraged from having an education, and so they sometimes are able to get a primary education, but they're discouraged from getting anything higher than that. No higher education is, generally women don't receive that. Some of them do, but not more. There's more opportunity in the urban areas of this country for women. Go ahead. That is all for my presentation. Here is my sources. So I had lots of different sources that I used for this. It was very interesting to study this country of Niger, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Have a great day.